Cause I'm a fool for your love.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us tonight. It is hybrid groups. Hopefully you are with your group right now, and it's going to be a great night to be together. And I know some of you are meeting in homes, and some of you are meeting in the church, wherever in the building. We're super pumped to do this kind of small group tonight. We're going to be in small groups at the beginning of youth group next week, and then we'll wrap up right before spring break on March 16th in all small group night. So you get to hang out with your groups. So make sure maybe even tonight, take about 10 minutes and figure out maybe what you want to do for all small group night coming up on March 16th. We're starting a series, a conversation, if you will, called Asking for a Friend. And the reality is that we all might have some questions that we want to ask that maybe we're not quite ready to say that's my question, but it's okay if we suggest that it's someone else's question. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I had all kinds of questions, and mainly those centered around why. Why did things happen? Why do things work the way that they do? Why do people respond the way that they do? And no one ever had the answers for me. But the reality is that you and I, when it comes to questions, we can often think that those questions maybe aren't valid because of a whole bunch of different situations we found ourselves in. We might find ourselves asking questions about why life is the way that it is. We might be asking ourselves questions like, why are we not playing baseball? Maybe you don't care about baseball. Maybe you could ask yourself questions like, why is it cold in the wintertime? All of these kind of questions lead us to a certain place. And what we've noticed is, and why we're having a conversation like this, is that oftentimes it's the unasked questions. It's the questions that we've been thinking about, we've been processing, but we haven't actually said them out loud that can lead to all kinds of different end results. And most times, oftentimes, when we don't ask the questions that we have, we can find ourselves either creating our own answers or living in a space of doubt that doesn't allow us to have a growing faith. So the whole point of this conversation of these next few weeks is for you to ask those questions. So at the bottom of the screen, somewhere down here, is a number, and you're going to actually be able to text your questions to that number. So you'll be able to text a question you have. Maybe you have a question about the Detroit Tigers. You probably don't. We all know they're going to struggle this year. Maybe you have a question about the meaning of the sky being blue, and we'll find a scientist to answer that question for you. Or maybe you have why is 2 + 2 4? Probably because these 2 + these 2 equals. I mean, you get the point, is that you ask whatever questions you want about whatever you want. We're going to have a Q&A night actually next week where we're going to come together and we're going to answer some of the questions that you're asking today and in the next week before next Wednesday night. One of the big questions that our student leadership team asked was, why do bad things happen? And is God truly good? Just a couple small questions that, maybe we want to try and address over video. But why do bad things happen, and is God truly good? You hear about it all the time, that God is good, that God's working out things for our good. But how do we know that? And doesn't the existence of bad things or evil things cause us to wonder, is God actually good? And if God is not actually good, and he claims to be good and to be working for our good, when bad things happen, when they exist, does that suggest a question about whether or not God even exists? And maybe you're a person who's asking a question like that. I know for me, I was thinking about like how to introduce this conversation. Like, how do you begin a message on why do bad things happen, and try and keep things a little light? How do you try and find a video? I can't tell you how many office clip videos I tried to find, and none of them are appropriate. Or a Harry Potter video or something that's like pop culture to try and lighten the conversation. The reality is that for some of us, we've had some bad things happen to us. We've had some bad things happen around us. And the reality is that, well, you might have some of those things that have taken place in your life that cause you to ask the question, why do bad things happen? There are some of us who haven't had a ton of bad things happen. I'm super blessed because all of my grandparents are still alive. All of my parents are still alive. That's a huge blessing, I think, to me, because I've been able to share so much of my life with my parents and my grandparents. But not everybody's that way. Even some of you already in high school are at a place where some of those people who are so important in the hierarchy or the long-standing legacy of your family aren't there anymore. Some of us have experienced losses of friends. Some of us have experienced tragic accidents. Some of us have experienced all kinds of things that have led us to the question, why do bad things happen? Personally, again, I don't feel like I've had a ton of those things take place. So like when I try to counsel people about why are things happening in their life, sometimes I literally have to ask questions so that I can step into that. No matter where you're at tonight, the fact is that we can have things happen in our lives that to some people seem like terrible tragedies or incredible pain, while other people don't have that kind of, because pain and evil things and bad things that happen to us can be kind of relative, right? So for some of us, the loss of a grandparent wasn't as painful as the loss of a significant other. And so the reality is that sometimes we can define those things differently. For whatever reason, we walk through our lives and we experience life in a way that we can decipher what is good and what is bad. One of the questions maybe one of your small group leaders asked you is what is one of those times in your life where you knew what was taking place was good? It was incredibly good. Maybe it was so good, it's like one of those major memories in your life. That you were able to experience that thing or that timeline or those circumstantial events, whatever it might have been, and you defined that thing or that set of things as good. And it's something that you celebrate. It's something that you enjoyed. It's something that caused you happiness or contentedness, or maybe it even reminded you or gave you confidence that God was real. And so we can go through life and experience good things. And part of the reason why we can call those things good is because we can go through life and experience things that we call bad, that we define or we put inside of the framework of this thing, this event, these type of events, these set of circumstances is not good. The thing we're talking about tonight is there's a theological, philosophical term, and it's called the problem of evil. And this is a thing that's been debated and talked about for years and years and years and years and years and years and years by people who have lots more degrees than me or anybody in your sphere right now. So the fact is that the problem of evil has been utilized to try and discredit the existence of God or to prove that God couldn't possibly exist because God claims to be good. And the reality is that if you can define if something is bad, right? If we can sit here and say that killing someone is probably not a good thing, and that can sound extreme, right? It's fair to say that can kind of sound a little extreme when it comes to defining what is good and bad, right? That's probably evil. It's killing someone else is probably evil. But the fact is that if we can define that something is evil or that something is bad, then we can equally understand that somehow, some way, someone, something had to define what is good. Someone, something, maybe a being that is outside of all of our existence or our understanding, had to sit and define what is good and what we would define as good, right? And so this is your little philosophical nugget, is the reality is that the existence of us defining what is bad reveals the existence of what is good. And I don't say that to say we need to redefine what you've experienced in your life as bad. What I'm saying is the fact that you can identify certain things in your life as bad indicates that someone has defined that something is good, that you've experienced goodness before in your life that allows you to be able to identify or define what is bad, right? And that's like the first point. And recognize this is you could go into all kinds of discussions. As a matter of fact, if you're like me and you kind of get lost going down Google rabbit trails sometimes, kind of like my messages, you might be able to find yourself going down a rabbit trail of looking up arguments for and against the problem of evil. And what you'll find is there are lots of different conversations regarding how the problem of evil or the existence of bad things in our world proves that God does exist, because we get the idea or the law or the morality to say that stuff is good versus evil. So I want you to recognize that as we're talking about this, the fact that there are bad things, that we define are bad things in our lives, it reveals to us that there are things that are good, that have been deemed inherently good. And it's not just that a whole bunch of human beings got together and said, I think we're going to label all the things that are these things as bad and all the things that are these things as good. As a matter of fact, if you go back to the creation of good versus evil, you'll find that it's defined for us, right? Matter of fact, if you've got a Bible, in Genesis 3, you're going to see a whole big conversation, because the events of the entrances of bad things happens in Genesis 3. Of course, if you read your Bible in Genesis 1 and 2, if you started a year-long reading plan and gotten through Genesis 1, 2, and 3, you'll recognize God goes through the creation story. He creates the universe. He creates the skies, the heavens. He creates the earth, the water. He separates the earth from the water, the land from the water. He creates all of the animals. He creates man, and then he creates woman, and he sets them, and he gives them purpose, and he does this all in 6 days, and he says, this is good. He says, I've done all of these things. I've set this all up, and this is good. And then what happens in Genesis 3 is there's a question. Because God defines for Adam and for Eve what it will be to sustain what is good. Just listen and do what I say. Don't eat from that tree. But what happens? Well, we know that the enemy, Satan, the fallen angel, comes and he says, did God really say, don't eat from that tree? So basically what they're doing is, Satan is asking the question that's going to cause Adam and Eve to begin to question, did God really say this thing? And of course, there's nothing wrong with asking the question. As a matter of fact, there is no pain for Adam and Eve from asking the question. The problem came when they acted on their defined answer, which is to say, well, I don't know, did he really say that? So they take of the fruit, they eat of the fruit, and once they do that, in comes the questioning of what is good versus what is bad, because now all of a sudden, there isn't a defined good, because, well, do I get to define what is good, or does God define what is good? But it's in this moment that we see sin, or we're moving away from God's definition of good versus evil. And now we're moving to, well, we can define what is good and evil. And so sin enters the world. And so now all of a sudden, what was good, or what was flourishing, or what some might call perfect is now no longer perfect, and the relationship between God and creation, creator and creation, is broken, right? And so now all of a sudden, it's no longer there. Recognize that in Genesis 1 and 2, Adam and Eve have free will. They can choose to eat from the tree or not eat from the tree. They choose to, and sin enters the world. And now all of a sudden, bad things, because of our free will and Adam and Eve's free will, can begin to enter the conversation. And so it's in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 that we see how bad things enter into the conversation. And it's in this place that we then have to recognize that there was a definition of what was good. Genesis 1 and 2 gives us a clear picture of the definition that there was good, and it was established and it was defined by the Creator. And he also defined what would not be good, which was to eat of the tree. And because of the free will and the choice that man has, they chose a different definition. And it's in that we get the ultimate beginning of bad things entering into the world. And so if you have a definition of what is good, and now you have this definition of bad, and now it's kind of thrown off, when bad things happen, it causes us to ask questions. It causes us to ask questions that are relative to our experience, because we're trying to take the experiences that we have and decipher whether or not was that just me, or did someone do that to me? And if that thing happened to me, how in a world can a good God who says he loves me and sent his son to die for me and does all these things to remind me that what he's doing is good, how can that be true when these bad things happen? So I want to take you to another place in the New Testament. So if you have a Bible, I want you to go to John 16. John 16, the Gospel of John and chapter 16. And you're going to see what Jesus says to remind his disciples of this same type of concepts, right? Because the fact is what you deem to be difficult or bad or tragic in your life, I'm not going to tell you it's not. And so in this moment, what you have is Jesus is teaching his disciples some of the most core tenets of what's going on. He's teaching in the end of chapter 15 about how if the world hates you, or if you experience hatred from the world, recognize they hated me first. And not just like they treated me bad, but they treated me bad because they didn't know who I was, they disagreed with whatever their reason for it was, they treated him poorly. Or maybe we could say badly, right? And so he's teaching all these things, and he says this in verse 1 of chapter 16, and he's not done yet, but he says this, I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. These guys would have been following Jesus for 3 years. This is all that they knew. They left everything that they did have to come and follow after Jesus. They left their identities. They left the promise of a job with their family. They left their family. At one point, Jesus says to them, if you don't hate your mother and father in comparison to how much you love me, you're not worthy to follow me. Meaning, you got to give all that up to come and follow me. They have sacrificed everything. Peter even says, where would we go? What are we supposed to do if not to follow after you? Their entire lives are wrapped up in following after Jesus, and now he says, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to have to leave. This would have been huge for them. I mean, we're talking tragic for them, because they've given everything else up for this moment to follow after Jesus, and now he says, I got to leave. It's what's proper for me. I have to go. Now, some of us might describe that as bad. Jesus, you said you called them to follow you. You called them to follow closely after you, to listen to everything you said, to do all the things that you tell them to do. You've given them purpose. You've given them a plan. But now you're going to desert them. You're going to betray them. You're going to leave them out to dry. You're going to send this helper, but he's not you. And this is how you're going to lead them? I mean, some of us, maybe even culture today, would say that's either bad leadership, that's either betrayal, which is probably a bad thing, or that's just downright wrong. So you see how you can easily begin to take what's going on in your world and begin to define those things as bad. Again, these type of things, bad things happen in our world all the time, and we describe them how bad they are relative to our experience. But we all come to some conclusion that those bad things exist in our world, and we struggle sometimes to go, but there's good. So Jesus takes the time to tell these disciples all of these things that are going to take place. He tells them it's not going to get easier, that things are going to be difficult, that there's going to be things that they're going to have to experience that are not going to be what they would describe as good. And all of this is going to be birthed from this potential question of, why did Jesus leave us in the first place? Why did Jesus have to go? Why did Jesus have to do all these things? But Jesus recognizes this one thing. He recognizes that the unasked question about the things that are happening in their lives will only lead them to more doubt, to deeper questions that cause more damage. And so he really starts to dig in. If you look at the end of chapter 16, he says this, and he's being quite clear. Basically, if we can restate what he's saying, is, will you struggle well? Listen, Jesus isn't saying to you tonight, you've experienced bad things, and you should just disregard those things when you think about how good I am. That you should wipe those things away and disregard all the difficult, the tricky things, the conversation with mom and dad, the conversation that mom and dad are having about their marriage, the conversation about whether or not you can date, the way that they want to help you make decisions for the future, the discipline they've had to come down on you with, the stuff you're thinking about your future and college and vocation and job and friends and prom and is Jesus even close in all of those things? And am I even close to Jesus? Am I even following Jesus? Do I have a close relationship with? Am I doing enough? Am I being good? Like all of those things that start to make you question because of all these things that have taken place. Why did we lose him? Why did he get cancer? Why is grandpa gone? Like all of those things that are bad things that have come into your world and make you go, is God really good? Jesus isn't saying you have to ignore all those things and then think about how good I am. No, in the midst of all of those things, Jesus looks at you and he looks at me and he says, in the midst of those things, in the presence of all of those things, the bad things that have happened, recognize I am with you. That in the midst of all of those things, you can struggle well. Because why? I want you to take heart in me, because I have overcome all of those things as well. You're probably going, okay, Jeff, great. So I'm supposed to just work through this. I'm supposed to be peachy keen and happy. No. Don't hear this as a self-help conversation. This is not a, you just need to make sure that you're just having a happy face. This isn't a, you need to change your attitude thing. This is a, you need to place your confidence in him in the midst of the bad things. And can I just tell you this right now? When I use the term to struggle well, what I'm not saying is by yourself. What I'm not saying is inauthentically. And what I'm not saying is by living in ignorance. And so let me clarify what I mean by those. What I mean by struggling well is you struggle well when you struggle with someone together. Like you've had things happen around you. Maybe they've happened to you, or maybe they've happened to friends that you have, or maybe they've happened to family members that you have. And my question is not, did you watch them struggle well? Did you struggle apart from it? Who are you struggling well with? Like, who are you asking your questions to? Like, who are you talking about the doubts that have come up in your world because of the things that have happened to you? If you want an interesting story to read, Job is an incredible book in the Old Testament. And Job is this upright man, meaning he followed after God. And the devil comes to God and says, all right, who can I mess with? And God says, well, I've got this upright servant named Job. And there's 30-something chapters of this experience of Job going through all of these hardships and all of these pains. And the people who are around him just tell him, well, just curse God and die. His wife tells him to curse God and die. And in the midst of that, what he really needed in that moment was just people who sat and listened to him complain, listened to him whine, listened to him cry out to God. Who are you struggling with if you feel like you're going through the bad things? It's not the best thing to struggle well by yourself. You won't struggle well by yourself. So who are you bringing in to that conversation so you can struggle well with somebody? You can't struggle well inauthentically. You got to be honest about the struggle. We can't help steer and guide and struggle with a person if they aren't authentic about what they're struggling with. Listen, this world that we live in tells us we shouldn't tell everybody everything. This world we live in tells us we shouldn't tell everybody anything. This world we live in tells us we should keep it all close because if we let it out, then people know. And if people know, that's worse than actually struggling. Can I just say this? If you can struggle authentically with somebody else, you'll release the pain of the bad things. You'll release the pain of these things you're trying to wrestle with, and you'll then invite someone else to struggle well with you. So be authentic. Don't be inauthentic about it. Be authentic, right? So, yeah, this happened, and I'm ticked about it. Yeah, this happened, and I just don't even know where to go. Yeah, this happened, and I've just got so many questions. Yeah, this happened, and I'm not even sure if God really exists. Can I tell you right now, you have so much to wrestle through, and Jesus is so big that he will wrestle with you. Why? Because he wants you to have the confidence that when these things happen, in him you can have peace. So then the last part, you don't have to struggle. To struggle well does not mean to struggle in ignorance. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to fake it. The point of what he's saying this to all of his disciples, and not so that they have more teaching, but so that they are released to struggle. Listen, gang, life is a struggle. You're going to go through life. You're going to have disappointments. You're going to have things that are going to be frustrating. You're going to be annoyed. You can't struggle in ignorance of, well, I got to fake it and I got to live. I can't show that. Yeah, do you want to walk around moping? But no, but sometimes, guess what? Especially when you have the people who will help you struggle well, struggle authentically, struggle, in community with each other. That's where you live into, oh man, I just don't even know. I just don't even know. I'm working through this, or I'm struggling through this. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to be happy, happy, joy, joy all of the time. But you do have to be in connection with people, and you do have to be authentic in what you're wrestling with, and you can't be ignorant to the reality of what's going on. So we struggle well when bad things happen. That's the goal. And struggling well, when you struggle with people, when you struggle authentically, when you struggle with recognition of what's taking place, do you know what you do when you do that? You give yourself the opportunity to grow closer to Jesus. Because the first person, the biggest person to struggle well with is with Jesus. I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. So my hope tonight is that you'll recognize, A, There are bad things that don't discredit the existence of a good God. And when those bad things happen to us, it's God's call on us. It's his invitation to us to struggle well with him. So, can we have some conversations tonight that might open those doors a little bit? That might give us the opportunity to say, this is the thing I'm struggling with right now. Because here's the thing, and this is the bottom line of the entire series. Because we're talking about questions, right? I'm asking this for a friend. Here's the bottom line of the whole series. Questions, wonderings, those things aren't toxic to faith. You think Jesus didn't think that those hard things were going to cause them to ask questions? He knew it. He knew that they were going to have a struggle. He knew that they were going to have some doubts. He knew that they were going to have to wrestle with these things. But he didn't say, don't ask your questions. And I'm saying the same thing to you. It's not questions that are toxic to faith. It's not questions that cause those things. It's doubt. And when we don't ask the questions that we're feeling, we begin to doubt. So, let's struggle well. And it's when we struggle well in community, authentically, and with reality of what's going on, that we will struggle well and we'll begin to ask the questions in safe places, in secure places that will help us to not have questions that are toxic to our faith in Jesus, but will help us eliminate the doubt that is toxic to our faith in Jesus. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you so much for sending your Son to this earth to live amongst us, to die and rise again, and to give us teachings like these, authentic teachings like these to his closest disciples that help us live and ask those questions and live into who he is, because it's in him that we find peace. God, when bad things happen, let's call them bad things, but let's recognize that in the midst of those bad things, you are there also. And so God, help us to press in tonight, help us to struggle well and ask the questions that need to be asked so that questions fuel our faith and eliminate the doubt that becomes toxic. Thank you, Jesus, for the conversations we're about to have. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the message tonight. I hope you guys can have some great conversations with your small group now. And don't forget, this Sunday, summer camp registration comes out. The people who sign up in the first week will get a camp survival kit, and it'll be the cheapest price. And we want lots and lots of people to sign up, because if there's enough, Jeff's head will get shaved. Bye, guys.